Welcome to the American Grip Podcast. Joining us today, Fleur Remington. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So you and I have been online friends for quite some time. You were once a guest on the Smoke Pit Podcast, and we're excited to have you in studio today to talk about your life and, pick apart all your past details for everybody. No, I'm kidding. But you were a dispatcher in the area that you live, and you noticed that there was a definitive lack of resources for the mental health of first responders, military veterans, and people of that sort. And so you decided to take some action, and you didn't do that just in the normal way that some people might. You actually started campaigning for it as part of Pageantry. So would you please tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was an emergency services dispatcher for over 4 years with 2 accommodation medals. And most employees now, they have things called like EAP, Employee Assistant Program, something like that. And we were made aware when I started that, okay, here's the little brochure in the break room. If you ever need it, call the number. And I was like, okay.
The old reach out if you need help.
Yeah, reach out if you need help. So, I always knew they were there. And a few years in, I was like, man, I could really use somebody to talk to. So I go to look for those brochures, and there's nothing there. And I'm looking through all the cabinets. I'm looking in the, what's that called?
Pantry? The drawers?
Briefing.
There it is.
Briefing room. Some people call it mustard, and it gets me all confused.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. So my afternoon sergeant, him and I, we've discussed some things in the past. So he was able to find some stuff for us, and we're just not educated on what resources there are for us. And not only are we not educated, it's not given to us. And through Pageantry, I participated with the Miss Spirit organization, who they require you to have some sort of advocacy and community service.
Yeah.
So through them, I started volunteering for Western New York Heroes and American Warrior Festival and Strength in Numbers to help put the word out there that there are these resources out there, and you don't have to scramble and look around because I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I'm putting these resources out for you. And if anybody ever comes to me and is like, hey, I'm really struggling right now, what can you do for me? And I'm like, I got you. Let's sit down. Let's talk. And obviously, number one on the list is, are you going to hurt yourself today?
Yeah.
Because if you are, we gotta stop that
Next echelon of care
right now.
And so a lot of people may not realize that it's not necessarily just like the frontline troops or, the firefighters and police officers that were in the big disasters. It adds up. And everybody is affected by stress in different ways. And as a dispatcher, you are literally the first point of contact that most people had on the worst days of their lives. And so when they, call 911 and they're panicked, something's happening, they're in danger, a loved one is in danger, or, at risk of something, and, they're pouring all of this stress into the one lifeline that they have through their phone. And it's a real person on the other side of the line. And in this instance, it was you. And beyond that, now you have to communicate that to people who are day in, day out in these dangerous situations, and then oftentimes see them afterwards, where you kind of have this idea where you're sending people that you probably came to know that became your friends into harm's way. And so I think a lot of people probably don't realize the toll that can take on people who work in all facets of emergency services.
Absolutely. So a lot that happens with dispatchers is we don't get closure. We don't know what happens after we send those resources. Sometimes we do, because where I worked, I was actually inside of the sheriff's office. So the deputies would come and be like, yo, this woman, and I'm like, tell me, because I need to know what happened.
All the spicy curry.
But there's times you work those 8, 12, 16 hours, you come home and you just lie there and you're like, I hope she's okay. I did the best I could to help her in that instance, and I sent her the resources to help her, but I don't know how it ended.
Yeah.
And you just, you just get in this cycle in your head of just thinking through things. And they just expect you to just cover it like a scab and just pretend it's not there. And, yes, it comes with the job. We all know what we're signing up for. That's why we want to do this. We want to help people. But at the end of the day, we're still human beings. We still have feelings. We still react to things as you normally should when, God forbid, a parent finds their child who has killed themselves in their home. That's not something you're just like, just another day at the office. Yeah. It's fine. No, that stuff stays with you, and it stays with you for a really long time.
No, for sure. There are a lot of people out there that are very empathetic, and if their friend has a bad day, I got a flat tire, and they're like, oh, that sucks, I'm so sorry. And, they internalize that. Now it's like you're in a position where you're constantly hearing these worst case scenarios over and over. And then now you're in a position where now it's adding up, and you go to seek the resources that you need in order to be there for other people. And you have to jump through obstacles. And so through the pageantry, you were able to bring awareness to some of these organizations. So would you walk us a little bit through of like kind of how did you get into pageantry, and when did you decide that the specific causes that you were going to highlight would be something that you would invest so much into?
So I started pageantry when I was 18 years old, so about a decade ago, if you guys can do the math. I received a flyer in the mail for the Miss New York USA pageant, which is part of the Miss Universe organization that everybody and their brother knows about. And I asked my mom, I was like, you've always told me I'm so pretty. You've always said I should do things like this, here's my opportunity, let's go for it. And that was my first pageant, and it was huge. Yeah. It was near New York City, and almost 200 girls were competing. And here's 18-year-old Fleur, who has no experience in the game. Yeah. I mean, I performed in school, I was in drama club, chorus, whatever, stuff like that. But being just by yourself on stage, being vulnerable, it's a little bit different. Yeah. So, over the years, I started to get more interested in community service and organizations that actually want you to advocate for things. And probably when I was about 21-ish, I decided that I was going to start volunteering with the New York State Police Foundation at the Erie County Fair. And while I was there, I actually met Western New York Heroes, which is one of the organizations that I work with monthly now. They were in the same building, and one of the troopers I was with, he actually served in the Army with the founder of Western New York Heroes, and he told me all about it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. And, I had already started to build that relationship with, uniform cops and things like that. And then I started working for the sheriff's office and got more connections with everybody in the county. And then probably 7 years ago, I started actually my platform of veteran suicide awareness and veteran assistance. Yeah. And that has now changed to Project VETS, VETS standing for Veterans Education, Therapy, and Socialization.
Yeah, and I think that was around the time that you and I started getting mixed into some of the same circles. And there are these huge organizations out there that, they spend millions of dollars on commercials, and everybody knows about it. But there are so many local opportunities in order to give back to those who, to support those who serve. And a few of the things that I saw that you did was, after you won your title, which could you tell our listeners about your accolades?
So I had a state title, Miss Spirit of the Empire State 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And then I won probably my dream title, which was the Miss Spirit of the USA. Yeah. And I had that title for about 18 months. And now I currently have a Legacy USA title for the Spirit organization. So that means I can still advocate and go in my community with my crown and sash. It's kind of like a retirement title. Yeah. I'm still in pageantry and things like that, but just with the system, it's like getting out of the Marine Corps after 5 deployments and hosting a podcast. There you go. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I as I followed your journey, like I saw that you would go out and advocate at like fairs and community events and stuff. But then even more than that, it wasn't just like standing there and like waving with the crown and the sash. Like you would help plant trees in memorial gardens for first responders. And that may not be something that, you know, people will see on a Super Bowl commercial, but to the families of those who go to that memorial garden, to the comrades of those who go to that place to, you know, pay their respects and to sit there in contemplation with their fallen loved ones, having those additional amenities and just like the little beautification and the fact that people are putting effort into this to remember them has to mean the world to them.
Absolutely. One of the people that I worked with as a dispatcher, her mother, that memorial garden is partially for her mother because she worked for the New York State Police. And she asked me one day, she's like, are there any blue flowers in there? Because my mom really likes blue. And I was like, you know what? There are. She's like, thank you. That makes me feel really, really good. And she eventually went and saw it. And she's like, it's absolutely beautiful. You guys did a great job. And it's just little things like that of, you know, I love gardening. So it's nothing where I'm like, oh, I got to go do this. Like, yeah. I love gardening and I love serving my community. So it was just a wonderful thing that I was able to do.
And oftentimes when we do stuff like that, it's not necessarily for the person that passed away. They're no longer here.
Right.
You know, we can say that their spirit is still with us, their memory is still with us. But a lot of times these types of acts are for those who remain. And, you know, although, you know, the pain remains, so do we. And we have to find our own ways of processing that and, you know, giving ourselves the motivation to get up every day. And then eventually you get through the healing process and you start to find your own reasons, not just for the sake of surviving, not just for the sake of wanting to not disappoint those who passed on, but then you start becoming more of a force in your community and figuring out the things that are important to you and how you can work through those things to help other people. And processing trauma is different for everyone, but those type of things, particularly when we do things in memoriam, like when we read all the names of the people who passed away on 9/11 here at Grunt Style, you know, when we have memorial parades, when we do things like set up the gardens, those things are just as much for ourselves and for the loved ones as a way to help us cope with our own grief.
It gives you a connection back to them.
Yeah. And a small bit of closure as well.
Absolutely.
And there are just so many opportunities out there in the community. But then there's some areas that there are things that are underdeveloped. And part of what you did was identify, hey, you know, this is something that is needed. And I am going to use my title. I'm going to use my time. I'm going to use my, my platform to put a spotlight and help these organizations, garner more attention or get more support or go out there directly and support them. And this is, something to, something to look towards if you're out there in your own community and you're looking for examples of how I can give back, whether it's like I'm trying to process my own trauma and I'm looking for something to help, or maybe you're past that where you just want to do things, for the sake of helping people. But this is kind of a blueprint. So if you were to give any advice to those who are looking to bolster these types of organizations in their own unit, or perhaps even plant the seeds of their own, if none of these resources exist, what would you say?
Start going to events. I think that's what really got me started is I was volunteering for the New York State Police, and I had it with one of my first pageant titles, and I was like, yeah, I'll come. And that's how I met West New York Heroes. And that's kind of what planted the seed for me, because I figured out how much our community was lacking. I was like, I have to do something about this. Not only are my friends and family being affected by this, but now becoming a dispatcher, I was having some of the same struggles. So from that, I believe, being in that event and finding that thing that just puts that spark in you, word of mouth.
Yeah.
Seriously, like we have all this technology, we have basically the world at our fingertips. But if you aren't out there and if you're not present in your community and you're not talking to people, that information's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
This past year when I was at the fair volunteering for Western New York Heroes, one of the other volunteers there, she's with the Army, and I was telling her about what I do and the organizations that I work with. And one of the organizations, Strength in Numbers, they actually have a youth program to help teens and kids who are interested in joining the military, help them with their test scores, help them with their physical fitness to make sure they can pass those things.
Yeah.
And she's like, can I have that guy's number? That sounds fantastic. I know so many people who could benefit from this. So me just being there and talking with her, I just put out so many other routes from just that simple conversation that so many people are going to get help just from doing that.
Yeah. And you're from more of a rural part of New York, right?
Yep, we got more cows than people.
More cows than people. Title of the episode. But so in these types of areas where things are so spread out, it would almost seem like the best way to do that networking and kind of garner support, whether you're going to volunteer at an established organization or you identify something particular, like, man, I really wish there was more of blank and whatever that is, and you set it up.
Right.
It seems like it's a bit of a different beast to deal with, being from a rural area versus where if you live in a more populated area.
Right, because some people, they don't have a vehicle they can depend on to drive an hour to get to these places. And Western New York Heroes does serve 18 counties in New York. It is starting to spread into Pennsylvania and Ohio. But still, if someone's got to drive somewhere to get these resources, it's going to be very limited for them. So when there are events locally, that are 10-minute drive or in more populated areas in my county, I make sure that I am there to make sure that they can get that information and those phone numbers and those email addresses. That way they can contact those people and possibly get, Western New York Heroes does donate gently used vehicles to veterans in need, and so does Operation Build Up. Be able to get that car and get that truck so they can make those trips, so they can go to their doctor's offices, so they can get their therapy and not have to worry.
Yeah, it's something that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Maybe if you're from that part of the country, you would. But like, I'm sure there's counties in Wyoming I've never heard of, but there are first responders and veterans out there that probably have to drive 20, 30, 50, 100 miles to to their doctor's office. And
there's no Uber. There's no Uber where I live.
Yeah.
So you can't even be like, oh, I'm just going to hop on over to Buffalo with this Uber. Can't do it because there's no Ubers.
Yeah, no, if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around this concept, Google a map of like some random fast food chain like Checkers or Rally's, right? And then just see the disparity of like how far there is between one and the other. And you think about like, okay, like imagine if that was whatever this resource is, like you have a specific ailment or a specific issue and you're that far away from whatever the treatment center is, particularly if you live, in the Midwest or in more rural areas. Like we're kind of spoiled and, here in Texas and on the East Coast, like I can go an hour and a half that way. There's Austin, a few hours this way, Dallas, Houston, and then there's a ton of stuff along the way. And there's kind of like this corridor of, you see where there's a lot of kind of like a lot of rain in Texas, and that's where they built a lot of the cities. And so like there's a lot of resources available up and down and this way for within this corridor. But then you go out to places like Montana or, like rural Ohio.
Horses.
And like, yeah, you might have to drive hours and hours and hours to get to something that we take for granted, being in the city, to be able to get to easily.
Right. Like just being able to be like, you know what, I could really like want some tacos right now, and you just Uber Eats them. No,
we had that conversation. Like I remember I pulled up my Uber Eats and I was like, there is food from 27 different cultures that I could Uber Eats right now, and it'll be here within an hour.
Yep.
Most of which will be in here in under half an hour. And I remember, I pulled up Uber Eats in your area, and it's like, oh, if I want to wait 45 minutes, I could get hot dogs from the gas station.
Basically, yeah. And that's if they actually come pick up your food, because we did use it once, and like, I think we used DoorDash, and they're like, the Dasher's on their way, and we're just like, he never went and picked up our food. It was just vibing there.
And so, as we talk about, our country and our fellow citizens, and we often tend to think about people in the large areas. And granted, like you see the map, like if you were to take the population of Los Angeles and then spread it out through like how many states is the population of Los Angeles bigger than? But you think about the land dimension, it's like, all right, well, they have to have somewhat of a population to support this type of business model. So even in these areas like the larger cities like Bozeman and stuff like that, Montana, Missoula, that's where those resources are going to be. But 6-7 hours northwest of there, like there's not going to be as much.
Right.
And so if you were to give any advice to somebody who was a dispatcher, right, and maybe they live in a rural area, maybe they live in a more populated area, they're just starting out their career, what would you tell them?
It's okay to feel things. Don't be ashamed by that, and don't think you need to hide it from your coworkers. I had that feeling for a very long time that I couldn't show that I was a person, and I think that was my downfall. And the job will change you. It happens. But at the end of the day, you need to remember who you are and what you stand for and what you want yourself to be as a person. And if, in a few years, you're like, this isn't for me anymore, I want to move on with my life, that's okay. There's no shame in it. We all make moves in our career. And, I have a degree in criminal justice, and I was training someone at my new job, and they asked me what I did, and I told them that, and they're like, so what are you doing in IT? I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm doing in IT. God forbid, I've had the same phone for like 20 years. I know nothing about IT, but just a better work-life balance. That is what I was looking for.
The work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And it says you did 4 years. It's almost like doing an enlistment.
I know. I was just thinking about that the other day.
Yeah. All right. And so do you find any parallels between the way that you thought you had to conduct yourself at your job as a dispatcher with the way that you have to conduct yourself, as a legacy pageant title holder, where there's kind of like this facade that you have to put forth of like smile, energetic, everything's fine, poised. Do you feel that there is some similarities there? Do you think they helped each other, or do you think you felt more inclined to do that at your job because you had been doing pageants since 18, where you kind of had to put this, like, it doesn't matter if you're having a bad day, when you're on the stage, you have to be poised, you have to be graceful, you have to be, present your best self. Do you think that they supported each other, or do you think that they contradicted each other?
I definitely think they supported each other, because pageantry gave me, that outlet of doing something that I enjoyed doing, and then also giving me that platform of advocating for people like you and myself that might need services that might not be available because of things that happened due to our career choices. Yeah. But it's all about, this is my job. I need to do my job properly. And I have someone's life literally in my hands, on the end of that phone. Yeah. And if I show up and I'm not in a good mood, I didn't sleep, I don't feel good, I still have to make sure I'm giving the best care possible, because that person is depending on me. And it's similar to what I do in pageantry. It's like, I need to make sure that I'm doing what's best for my community, because they count on me. Yeah. These people do count on me. And I don't think there's such pageantry, it's just looking at pretty girls, who's ever the skinniest wins. I'm like, it's not what it's about. It really, really isn't. There's so much good that comes out of these things, from community building, sportsmanship, friendliness, and I've won scholarships through doing pageantry, and it's just it's a wonderful thing to have. And
not to mention that there has to be a sense of obligation, because if you do win a title, now that's something you can bring back to your community, for your community to have pride in, but then also to be that extra byline when you're supporting these organizations, like, come see, the winner of this title here, right. Or, hey, we were, lucky to have this. And it's kind of like that extra support, that extra signal boost that they have to get people to pay attention to their organization, so they can better support those that serve.
Exactly. We're both benefiting each other. You know, I'm bringing the bright lights and the sparkle.
Yeah.
But but I'm also advocating for an organization that does well in my community and helps others.
For sure. So if you were to give any advice to somebody who wants to give into pageantry, what is like the first two things that come to mind?
There's a lot. Start small. You know, don't go too big because
Don't immediately go to the...
don't immediately go to Miss New York USA when you've had no pageant experience at all, because you're going to pay a lot of money and at the end of the day you're still going to cry. So the Miss Spirit organization was a great organization that really got my feet wet and gave me that confidence and that experience. So starting, just because a system is small, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. The Miss Spirit organization is probably one of the best ones I have been with, through just that feeling of sisterhood and family and the things that our director did for us. And the fact that we all have something we're passionate about. We all want to do better in our community. So start off small and then find someone, a system that has similar values as that you do and what you're looking for. I mean, if you're looking for this as a hobby, that's fantastic. Do some glitz pageants. Those are a lot of fun. If you're looking for it for scholarship purposes, go do the Miss America organization.
Yeah.
If you're looking for prize money, then, you know, go do Miss New York USA, where you get a nice $10,000 check if you win.
Yeah. So what's next for you then?
What is next for me? Well, I currently have my Legacy of the USA title. Mm-hmm. There is it's a smaller pageant. It's called Miss Military Star.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a veteran or related to someone in the community to, you know, compete. But they do focus on giving back to their veteran community. So I believe that's going to be my next chapter in January.
Oh, wow.
I'll be competing there in Syracuse, New York. And then possibly in June, I'll be in Orlando for the National United Miss competition.
Fantastic.
We'll see how it goes.
So is there anybody you'd like to plug, whether it be, you know, your own website, social media, or any of the organizations you work with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my buddy Dan Clore, he is the founder of American Warrior Festival and their sister company, Strength in Numbers. He travels all over the United States he's a Marine himself, to advocate for veterans and then also get this younger generation interested in joining the military with scholarships and tutoring and music lessons and all this other stuff. It's fantastic. He's a great guy. My social media, you can reach me the best at Project Vets on Facebook. Because like everything else in my life is private. Due to my past job, I realized that I don't need to let everybody into my life that friends request me on Facebook.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, Dan's great, Western New York Heroes, and I recently found an organization that's actually not too far from my house. It's called The Last Call. It's equine therapy for first responders and military vets. And hopefully when I get back, I can start working with them and see what they need for help, because I love horses, and I mean, why not go clean out a stall every other weekend to help out?
So are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Do what makes you happy. I was happy for a really long time when I was dispatching, and I loved the job, but at some point I knew I needed a change and I needed to do what made me happy and that brought joy back into my life. And I'm still serving my community. I'm still helping people, just in a different way. So, you know, find what really, really does make you tick. And if that doesn't work either, it's okay to change again. You know, really find what makes you happy. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. And if you ever need help, it's okay to ask for it. Please ask for help. I don't need to be losing any more friends.
What was it like your first day on the job and you got your real first life or death call and you realized, like, holy smokes, like this person's life is in my hands?
So I received something like that shortly after I got off training full time. And unfortunately, it was someone that I personally knew. So
wow.
when I got home, I just cried. I cried. I was like, holy crap. That was a tough one. But then what helped me a lot was shortly afterwards, I saw this person and they were happy and healthy. And I was like, all right, it was a hard call, but I saved that person's life. That was me, because it took so long, because we live in a very rural area. It took so long for help to get to them that I was that glimmer of hope that kept them going, and they're there today because of me.
It's fantastic. Fleur, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today here on the American Grit podcast. And we wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. And we want to thank you for everything that you've done to contribute back to your community.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be down here, and obviously to spend time with my buddy Dan.
And for all our listeners out there, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to tune into today's episode. And remember to have pride in yourself, pride in your country, and pride in your communities. And tune in to continue to help us support those who serve.